This story will help you learn English using the most common words from the Longman 3000 list. Reading and listening to stories is a fun way to practice English. Let's begin.
Jake had lived in Blackwood for many years, but he never noticed the house at the end of the street. It was hidden behind tall trees, covered in thick vines, and always dark. People said it had been empty for decades. But one evening, as Jake walked home, something strange happened. Jake felt a cold wind on his neck. He looked around. The street was empty. But when he turned back to the house, he saw something else. The old, rusty gate was open. He was sure it had always been closed before. He took a slow step forward. The wind blew again, and for a second, he thought he heard a whisper. It was soft, like a breath in the air. "Hello?" he called. No answer. Jake stood at the open gate. His heart beat faster. He told himself it was just an old house. There was no reason to be afraid, but something about it felt wrong. He placed his hand on the gate. It was cold, colder than the air. Slowly he pushed it. It made a loud creaking sound. The front door of the house was slightly open, as if someone had just gone inside. He stepped onto the porch. The wood was soft and rotten. Every step made a loud creak. He hesitated. Maybe he should turn around and go home. But then he heard it again. A whisper. This time it was clearer. "Help me." Jake's chest tightened. Someone was inside. Someone who needed help. He pushed the door open. The house was dark and cold. The air smelled like old wood and dust. The furniture was covered with white sheets, like ghosts standing in the corners. Jake walked carefully across the dusty floor. The whisper had come from upstairs. He looked at the staircase. The wood was broken in places, but it seemed strong enough to hold him. He took a deep breath and started climbing. The stairs creaked under his weight. The house was silent, except for the soft sound of the wind outside. The whisper had come from the attic. At the top of the stairs, he saw a long hallway. The attic door was at the end. A light shone from under it. But then, something moved. A shadow passed under the door. Jake's breath caught in his throat. Someone was in the attic. He wanted to run, but his feet wouldn't move. Slowly, he reached for the doorknob. It was warm, like someone had just touched it. His fingers shook as he turned it. The door opened with a long, low creak. Inside, the attic was filled with dust. A small candle burned on the wooden floor. Next to it lay an open book. The pages moved, as if touched by an unseen hand. Jake stepped inside. The air felt thick and heavy. He looked at the book. The letters were old and faded. The words didn't make sense. But then, the letters started to change. Jake's eyes widened as he saw his own name appear on the page. Jake. His hands turned cold. His heart pounded in his chest. The candle flickered. Jake heard the whisper again. But this time, it was right behind him. He spun around. There was no one there. Only shadows. He looked back at the book. The pages flipped on their own. A picture appeared. It showed a boy standing in this attic. The boy looked exactly like him. Jake took a step back. His breath came fast. The candle's flame grew taller, lighting up the room. Then, from the corner of the attic, something moved. A figure stepped forward, just outside the light. It was the same height as him. It stood still, watching. Jake felt his hands turn to ice. "Who are you?" he whispered. The figure stepped into the candlelight. Jake gasped. It was him. Same face, same hair, same clothes, but something was different. The other, Jake's eyes looked sad. "Help me," the other Jake whispered. His voice was weak. "I'm trapped." Jake's head spun. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. "Trapped?" he asked. "What do you mean?" The other Jake pointed at the book. "It's the house," he said. "It keeps us here." Jake felt a cold wave rush through him. "Us?" he asked. The other Jake nodded. "There were others before me," he said, "and before them." Jake looked down at the book. The pages moved again. Now there were more names. Ethan, Daniel, Oliver. Jake swallowed. "How do I get out?" he asked. The other Jake shook his head. "I don't know," he whispered. "I never found the way." The candle flickered again. The air grew colder. The attic began to shake. The shadows on the walls moved like living things. The pages of the book flipped wildly. Jake turned to run, but the door slammed shut. The whisper returned, louder now. "Stay, stay, stay." Jake grabbed the book. If this had the answers, he needed to find them fast. The candle went out. The room was black. Then, in the darkness, he heard a voice. Not a whisper this time. A scream. Jake opened his mouth to shout, but no sound came. The book glowed in his hands, its pages burning with strange light. Then, everything went silent, and the house on Blackwood Street remained dark once more.